Okay, let's close our eyes for a moment. Okay, lesson 29, in which we will continue lesson 29, in which we will continue the subject of Pratyahara and go into a little bit more detail. You see in the first paragraph an anecdote about the crow and the fox. It's really a story about ego. How does ego come into play in the subject of Pratyahara? That is, ego is a huge cause for attachment. And Pratyahara is detachment. And the reason why the subject is so important, apart from all the things that we discussed last week, is because it is very difficult to detach, especially when ego comes into play. So, let's have a look at the various forms of Pratyahara. Last week we had a general introduction of Pratyahara, what Pratyahara is, how it works. And today we have a systematic approach, a step-by-step approach. If one form doesn't work, you can try another form. Most important is the practical insight that it gives you and leading to a certain sense of control over your life and the things that happen in your life. So, first we have Yattamana Pratyahara, which is progressive Pratyahara. Progressive Pratyahara is a form of Pratyahara that most people, or some people, I don't know the percentage, but naturally we have a tendency to apply a sort of progressive Pratyahara. As an example, when you work in some place for an amount of time, a couple of years, you work in an office or some other kind of workplace, and for some reason you leave the job, maybe because you move house, you move to another city, you quit your job to find a job elsewhere, but you miss your colleagues, you miss your daily routine at work, having coffee with your colleagues and a chat. You miss the atmosphere that your new workplace is not offering. So you go back. You go back whenever you have a chance, back to the place that you liked so much, back to the place that you have so many memories of. So, in itself, this is very healthy to do that. But Yatamana Pratyahara means that if you stay stuck in that experience, it's blocking your life into the future. Because technically what is happening is you stay stuck in something that happened in the past. You literally stay stuck in the past. And it's natural that we do that. Attachment. We become attached to people, we become attached to an atmosphere, we become attached to an environment. And so when it is not there anymore, we always try to go back to it. Another example is the neighborhood where you were born and grew up. If you have moved, most people at some point move somewhere else. You always go back there. You always want to go back there. In itself, not a bad thing, but it becomes a distraction if it becomes obsessive. So when you notice that it is becoming an emotional issue that is actually distracting, then you start applying progressive pratyahara, which means that you start to take control. You regulate the amount of time that you spend thinking about the past and also literally, physically going back to that place. So just as a practical example, when it comes to your workplace, maybe in the beginning you go every Friday afternoon when everybody is in a weekend mood, you go there and you drink some coffee with your colleagues and you laugh and you chat about what's going on in the workplace. Then after a while, you increase the interval. Instead of going there every Friday, you go there once a month. And then after a while going there once a month, you then go there once every 3 months. Just as an example. Take control and start regulating how much you allow yourself to go back there. You can apply this to workplace, you can apply this to neighborhood where you grew up, you can apply this basically to everything in the past. And if you pay attention, you notice that it's very human, very natural to spend time reminiscing about the past, thinking about the past. A very clear example of this is, I always find it a very interesting example because it is so full of contradictions. It's the military draft. You know military draft? Military draft is the obligation for young men to go to the army. So in Korea there is this very negative sentiment about having to go to the army. It's a waste of time and the government is stealing my youth and my business opportunities and my study opportunity. All Korean people are smiling and nodding. Yeah? But look what happens. Young boys, they go to the army 2 years these days. It used to be 3 years. They reduced it. They have the time of their life. In spite of all the negative sentiment and all the complaints, 40 years later, 50 years later, they are still talking about the army. Even you see ajoshis who are still wearing their military uniform when they go fishing or when they ride their bicycle, or see, that is attachment. And in fact, while there is such negative sentiment, subconsciously everybody knows that it's actually not a bad experience at all. Everybody, especially the men, they always go back to the experience, to the adventures, to the transformation that they went through. So that is a funny kind of, but very interesting example. There are also very sad examples. People who experience war. When I was in my 20s, I used to go to southern France every summer vacation and stay there for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, if possible. And when you go to small villages, the past is still very much alive. And you go to a coffee shop, a bar, they call it bar tabak. They sell cigarettes, they sell coffee, croissant, but also beer, wine. So that is where the whole village, it's usually in the center of the village, a village square, and everybody gathers there for just some leisure time to you know, long before social media existed, that is where you got your news. And I notice there is a pattern in what people want to talk about, especially older generation. All they talk about is the war. Very sad. They keep, and even when you meet them today and tomorrow and then the day after tomorrow, every day you hear the same story. They can't stop talking about it. I also observed that people who stay stuck in the past do not grow anymore. They stop evolving, they stop developing. And because war is, of course, a very traumatic issue, the government understands that and usually gives those people very simple jobs, like street cleaner, or you know, the government jobs like in Korea, Kyongbi ajashi, the guard at the gate or at the front door of the apartments and what have you. Of course, the Korean situation is different, but in European countries, these people, because they do not evolve, they do not grow, they stay stuck on a very low level of society, very low level economically also, with very simple, unchallenging jobs, basically, just getting by. And all they can do, and do most of the day, is being in the past with their memory. So, it's very understandable, it's very human, but when you see that it's actually rather harmful, you can apply Pratyahara there. How does Pratyahara technically work? It starts with consciousness. That is why this subject is so important. We have to talk about it so you bring it to the surface of your consciousness. So it starts with consciousness. Consciousness, the realization that indeed you are being stuck in something, in a memory, in a person, in an event, and that you then consciously realize how it is distracting you, how it is keeping you from going forwards into the future. And then, because you have now started becoming conscious, you have to consciously decide, and this is really important, and also very difficult because of ego and emotion involved, attachment to the emotion, your thought that you think you have a right to stay stuck in that memory, it's yours. You have to decide at that moment to stop thinking about it and then redirect your attention to something else, consciously and very deliberately. And if you continue to do that, very difficult, especially where it comes to traumatic experience, if you continue to do that, it becomes second nature. Every time the memory comes to disturb you, to distract you, it becomes easier and easier to detach from it and stay focused on neutral and more positive and constructive issues that you are dealing with in your life. Then you create room, for example, to start a new study. You create room, for example, to start a more challenging job that requires attention, focus, concentration, which you didn't have before when you were so distracted by the past. So it has huge implications. It's something that you have to really stay on top of, because human nature simply causes us to be distracted without us being aware of what is happening, leave alone the realization that we can actually do something about it. So instead of being a victim, you take control, you become the master. Yoga, after all, is the science of mastership. And that's where it starts. Mastership starts with consciousness and your conscious decision to give shape to your life the way you choose to do it, and not dictated by past experiences. If the first one is not applicable or doesn't work, you have Pratyahara Pratyahara. The Pratyahara Pratyahara is exclusive detachment. It is in fact an extension of the previous one, but now you are going to play the scientist. You're going to investigate. Before I ever learned about Pratyahara, it happened very naturally. In my case, after I started practicing yoga, and as a result of that became very conscious of things I didn't care about before or didn't have consciousness about before. And that issue is smoking. I started smoking when I was quite young, and at the age of 20 I started smoking, and immediately I started becoming conscious of the harmful effect of smoking. And as a yogi, becoming sensitive and conscious, when something doesn't feel right, you naturally want to get rid of it. So very naturally, not because somebody told you, but because you feel it, you think by yourself, I really want to stop smoking. And then you realize that it is almost impossible. So I started trying to find information about smoking, and there are many things you already know. The fact that you get lung cancer from smoking, everybody knows. But when you start looking for information, you find out that there are multiple tens of harmful effects of smoking. From your skin, to your hair, to your organs, to your memory, to many things. So finding out about all these facts, I started writing them down. Every harmful effect, one A4 size paper, and I put them on the wall above my desk. And the whole wall was covered with about, it must have been 30 or 40 A4 size pieces of paper, each containing a harmful effect of smoking. Now something very interesting happens. Because it is in front of you, where you spend lots of time studying, reading, writing, your mind consciously and subconsciously is constantly drawn to these papers where all the harmful effects of smoking are written. And it solidifies, strengthens your resolve to stop smoking. It becomes like a mantra. And then you take control. Just while it is for most people so very difficult to stop smoking, for you it becomes just a natural consequence of the process making not just the smoking itself conscious, but everything that is related to it. And you realize that you cannot come up with one positive aspect of smoking. Although people who are not conscious of their smoking and the harmful effects will be able to tell you positive effect of smoking. They will say, it's good for my stress, it calms me down, and what have you. Not realizing that actually it causes more stress and more restlessness in the end. So you can apply this also to, very interesting also, relationships. You know that relationships, just like with smoking, can be very addictive. Because we become attached, because subconsciously we are afraid, scared about being alone, and at the same time, we do not have the strength or the courage to walk away from that harmful situation, an abusive relationship, mentally, emotionally abusive, or physically even abusive. And we because we function subconsciously, we are attached. We find all kinds of excuses to stay in that situation. Just like with smoking, you just have to sit down and rationally make a summary of the reasons why you feel resistance, why you feel what it is that is harming you, and then opposed to that you make a summary of why you choose to stay. What is happening as a result of this approach is that you become very conscious of your motivation. And when you realize that it is pure fear, that realization in itself will make you courageous, will make you become determined to overcome that fear, to challenge that fear. And that is what will allow you to eventually, not in the short term, usually it's a long-term process, but to eventually be able to make the step and say, I'm gone. For my own sake, for my own health, for my own well-being, I have to put an end to this. Pratyahara, based on consciousness and then taking the conscious decision to detach and redirect your attention or your energy. So exclusive detachment means that you have to very consciously determine why there is this urgent need to detach. And it applies especially to addictions. But addictions, as you see, is not only with substances. It can be gambling, it can be food, it can be relationships, emotional addiction. And then being attached to the past, the neighborhood where you grew up, can also be considered a condition, an addiction. If the first and the second step do not apply or do not seem to work, there is ekendriya pratyahara. Eka means one, indriya means sense. So this is a little bit a scientific approach, but it is again based on consciousness, and it starts with you trying to determine what it is in the case of smoking that causes your need for repeating to do that. Why do you need to smoke? What does it, is it taste? Or do I like the smell of the smoke? Or is it the effect that it has on me biologically? It's a little bit a scientific approach that I find a little bit impractical, and because of that we have the fourth and final step, and that is the one that I like the most, because it allows you simply to be human. It allows you also to fail when you have difficulty to detach. That is called Vajikara Pratyahara. And Vajikara Pratyahara is controlled Pratyahara. When you go to Holland, to the Netherlands, where I come from, you will notice that there are still traditional bakeries. Not only in Holland, also Germany, France, Belgium, all over Europe, I think. Small shops that where the 1 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock at night, the light goes on and they start preparing bread. When the bread goes into the oven, around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, the street is filled with the smell of baking bread. Have you ever smelled baking bread? Gosh. When you eat the bread, you cannot believe that it smells so delicious. Maybe a little bit disappointed when you taste. But the smell is just so awesome, so delicious. So you go to the bakery shop in the morning, and you have on your shopping list, of course, whole wheat bread. And that's it. But you are standing in front of the counter, and the whole wheat bread is packed on the shelves in the back. But in front of you, behind the glass window, there is chocolate cake, whipped cream cake, all kinds of cookies and pastries, and you know, and the pastries are being baked after the bread. So when you arrive at the bakery shop 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, the bread smell is gone and the pastry smell, which is even more delicious than bread smell. So the whole shop is full of that smell. And you order your whole wheat bread, saliva in your mouth, and you can't resist. You buy pastries and you go home with bread and pastries. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But as you know, pastries, delicious as they are, it's not the most of healthy foods. So if you become addicted to whole wheat bread, that's okay. That doesn't affect your health. On the contrary, it's actually adding to good health. If you become addicted to pastries and in an uncontrolled way have to consume the pastries, it contains so much sugar that it's not healthy anymore. And fats and what have you, and white flour, processed products a lot. So when you find yourself in such a situation and you can replace pastries with beer or wine, you can replace pastries even with sex. Sex can also be addictive. You can replace it with gambling. But what you do now is not in a violent way cutting yourself off from the problem, because then often it only gets worse. People start to struggle even more and the addiction even becomes bigger very often. What you do is you start playing with the pastries. You start playing with whatever it is that you feel attracted to, which you realize now is not a healthy thing. Once in a while it is a good thing. You can reward yourself once you have it under control. But for now you need to learn to control it. So you make yourself a shopping list with only the things that you really need, and you promise yourself before entering the shop to stick to the products that you have on your list. And very consciously you try to control yourself, standing in front of the display window, and walk out of the shop only with the products that you have on your list, the whole wheat bread. If you succeed, you feel incredibly empowered. If you fail, however, we have a tendency to self-harm ourselves emotionally, feeling guilty, regret, guilty. So the suggestion here is that you don't do that. The suggestion here is first of all that you realize you're only human. There's nothing wrong with a pastry or a beer, glass of wine, or what have you. But you realize that if it's in excess, that it becomes harmful. You try to control, stick to your list, and there are days that you lack this control and you end up buying pastries. What do? How do you approach this? You go home and you very consciously consume your pastries. Enjoy that delicious taste. It shouldn't be a punishment to enjoy something like that. But now when you're done, try also to be aware of what it does with you. An overdose of sugar, an overdose of fat, it destroys your energy. And every yoga practitioner, the first thing you become aware of is energy. And especially when you are lacking energy. For normal people who are not conscious of that, they always go up and down. You have highs and you have lows. You have lots of energy and suddenly you are without. As a yogi now, you enjoy your pastry. That is spiritual in itself. It brings your energy up. It elevates your spirit literally. But then you notice that you crash. Your energy then drops drastically. And that, like with the smoking, that will be your motivation next time when you go to the bakery shop to try again, and then maybe a little bit harder than last time, to control. When you succeed, it empowers you, it strengthens you, it gives you self-respect, pride, dignity. When you fail, don't do the opposite. Do not allow it to destroy your self-respect. Instead, allow yourself the vice, but do it consciously, and be aware of the negative effect. Once you have it under control, you can once a month, or once a week, or once every 2 weeks, you can allow yourself to enjoy that vice. But the rest of the time, you stay away from it. You become the boss, you become the master, and that is what it is all about. When you can apply it in this way, in this playful way, with things like a glass of beer, a pastry, or a snack. Holland has... Have you ever been there? If you go there, go to a Dutch snack bar. It's heaven. Like the bakery shops, the smell of it just is irresistible. It's impossible to pass by a snack bar without buying something. But it's all deep fried. So same with pastries, enjoy it. But stay in control. My mom was very good at this. My mom had fixed times for... We would go to the beach or to the swimming pool. Children always ask for ice cream. No. No ice cream. But once in a while, on set times, we were allowed to have an ice cream. Same with chips, potato chips. Saturday evening, potato chips with 1 glass of Coca-Cola or cider, 7-Up. The rest of the week, if you ask for lemonade or Coca-Cola, my mom says, it's a Dutch expression, the water tap is very patient. Which means, just drink water. So be very consistent, very consequent in that approach. And as an adult, Your parents don't do that for you anymore, so you have to take control yourself. So if you find it difficult, then set fixed times that you allow yourself to allow your vice. And then something that can be harmful turns into something good, something positive. Because enjoyment in itself is not a bad thing. It is overdoing it, indulging in something that makes it harmful. And for human beings, we all know from our own experience, that can be very difficult to control. So here, you are allowed to be human, you're allowed to fail, but with the promise to yourself that in that game that you play with yourself, and in your flexibility of being human, you do work towards the point that you can control. The key word in all of these 4 steps is consciousness. Pratyahara is first the realization, consciousness. Something I don't agree with, something that distracts me, something that hurts me, harms me. The realization, consciousness. The next step is the realization that it's not what you want to do, it's not where you want to be. The realization that you want to move away from it, that you want to detach from it. And then the realization how difficult it is, and that it requires attention and persistence also, but also a flexible attitude. You are allowed to play, you are allowed to fail, but with a direction towards more and more control. Apply this also to your yoga practice. You have a kind of a reverse situation here. Yoga practice is often not something we indulge in. It's something that we do because it feels good. But then, instead of indulging in it, we find ourselves feeling the need to practice more. You can put yoga on your wall in your living room. It's a mantra, it becomes a mantra. If you have difficulty practicing yoga regularly, put the word yoga on your wall. A4 size or like here, bigger. You can make it, if you're a little bit artistic, you can make it nice with this and that. And every day, because you spend time in that room, you see that word, and subconsciously, it will make some connections that eventually will make you take out your mat and start doing yoga. But here also, exactly the same as with harmful issues in our lives, we do it in a playful way. Sometimes we're lazy. You accept that you're only human, but do it consciously. When you're lazy and you're conscious of your laziness, you realize, you feel that there is a negative attitude behind it. You also feel, and you know from previous experiences, because you're doing it more and more consciously, you know that if you have the courage to overcome your laziness and you do a little bit, at least a little bit of yoga, that it feels so good after all. That after all, you always feel like, wow, I'm so happy actually that I overcame my laziness, that at least I did a little bit. This is how you take control, by doing all these things consciously. Questions? If possible, once in a while, review your notes, your information on Pratyahara, because we are only human. We easily fall back into old patterns, especially we fall back into conscious functioning. It takes time to make that shift from subconscious functioning to more and more conscious functioning. When you're stuck, review Pratyahara and you will see that the answer is there. Okay, let's have a short break then.